were often seen by the local Southerners as being self-serving with a patronizing reverence for the untutored wisdom of the poor and ignorance of local culture. According to Pauletta, this was more about class and education than race. Though there were concerns about white liabilities as black community organizers, by 1966, however, black power had taken over, and the new leadership of SNCC wanted to distinguish themselves from Northern liberals by something tougher and more militant. It was worth comparing the experience of community organization as an exercise in participatory democracy with that of the man who did more than most to develop the idea of organizing local communities to take on local power structures. Sal Alinsky was born in Chicago in 1909 and joined the University of Chicago Sociology Department as an undergraduate in 1926. The department was then under the leadership of Robert Park, who had come to sociology later in his career after starting off as a reporter, was attuned to city life in all its forms and studied it with an almost voyeuristic curiosity. Introduction to the Science of Sociology, the book he published in 1921 was his close colleague Edwin Berges, was for 2 decades a core text in the field. Berges, a diffident man in Park Shadow, was more of a social reformer. He viewed social research as the solutions to society's ills, but less in terms of elite prescriptions and more in democratic terms as a means of harnessing social change. Park and Berges took students on field trips to explore Chicago, from the dance halls to the schools, the churches, and the families. The city was large and diverse with distinctive immigrant communities, organized criminal gangs, of which Al Capone's was the most famous, flourished during the Prohibition era. The proximity to Canada meant that Chicago was a natural base for smuggling illicit liquor into the United States, and vicious competition developed over the control of the trade. The city should be a focus of study, Park argued, for it showed the good and evil in human nature and access. It is this fact, perhaps more than any other, which justifies the view that would make of the city a laboratory or clinic in which human nature and social processes may become most conveniently and profitably studied. Critical to this school of thought was a conviction bolstered by research that social problems had social rather than personal causes. Berges took this a step further than Park, arguing that the role of researchers was to organize the community for self-investigation. The community should survey its own problems, educate themselves about social issues, and develop a core group of leaders prepared to organize for social advance. Berges became a major influence on Alinsky, not least because he recognized in his student an ability that his academic record had obscured. Alinsky was drawn to criminology, and upon graduation, he got a fellowship with Berges' support. He decided to make a study of the Capone gang, if possible, from the inside. Eventually, he made contact by hanging around the gangsters and listening to their stories. For a while, he worked as a criminologist in a state prison. Then, in 1936, he joined the Chicago Area Project, designed to show how delinquency could be addressed socially. The cause of criminality was not individual feeble-mindedness, but neighborhoods marked by multiple and reinforcing problems of poverty and unemployment. Berges set the principle for the organizers. The program should be for the neighborhood as a whole, with local people anonymous in planning and operations. This required an emphasis on training and local leadership, strengthening established neighborhood institution, and using activities as a device to create participation. He argued that local organizers, preferably former delinquents, could help show their own people a way to more acceptable behavior. This approach was controversial. He was directly challenging paternalistic social work and was accused of tolerating criminality, encouraging populist agitators to stir up local people against those who were trying to help them and had their best interest at heart. In 1938, Alinsky was assigned to the tough back of the Yards neighborhood in Chicago, already notorious as the jungle of Uptown St. Clair's. 1906. Although he was a natural in the organizer's role, clever, streetwise, and brash. Alinsky had a knack of gaining the confidence of people who might otherwise feel neglected and marginalized. His approach was more political than the project allowed, however. Not only did he use the issue of delinquency to move into virtually all problems facing the neighborhood, but he also put together a community organization based on representatives of key groups who had clout because of who they represented, and not just as individuals. Alinsky also drew organized labor into his campaign, well exceeding his brief by getting involved in a struggle against the meatpacking industry. By 1940, he had left the project and struck out on his own. Over time, he became more scathing in his critique of the social sciences as remote from the realities of everyday existence, quoting a description of the University of Chicago Sociology Department as an institution that invests $100,000 on a research program to discover the location of brothels that any taxi driver could tell him about for nothing. He added his own observation that asking a sociologist to solve a problem is like